Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we mark today, day 545 since the atrocities committed by the Islamist Hamas from the Gaza Strip on southern Israel, capturing over 250, mostly civilians, and with 59 hostages remaining in Hamas captivity to date, Israel is now escalating further the offensive, placing additional pressure on the internationally designated terrorist organization, and to deliberate that and more. Let's now introduce our panelists for today. We'll start with Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, who is the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. Next to him, Colonel in Reserve Reuven Ben Shalom, who is a cross-cultural strategist and a senior fellow at the Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University. And last but not least, Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Amnon Sofrin, who is formerly served as the Chief of Intelligence at Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. It's great to see all three of you. And we'll start with you, General Gavish. When we're looking currently at the Gaza Strip, we're seeing various statements coming out saying basically we're going to apply additional pressure for as long as it takes until the hostages come home.
Well, indeed, Jonathan, and when we are talking about additional pressure, we have to say that there is now three divisions which are operating in this area, and a new division that just became part of the maneuver. So the pressure is there, the plans are there, the willingness is there, and the decision of the Israeli government, backed up by the defense establishment, that probably the best way to deal with the situation and with the Hamas is to enhance the military situation, I would say, or the military power that is being applied over there, because it looks that this would be the only way that the Hamas would be willing to release hostages. It was announced that the reason for what Israel is doing now, it is directly this, to go back to the negotiation table, but this time under the military pressure. Days will tell. We all understand the positive part of it, but also the negative part of it, and the risk in a way that Israel is taking with the hostages. We know with the when we hear it from those hostages that are now with us here in Israel, that they feel those bombardments. We know that unfortunately some of them even died from the Israeli bombardments, and so this is a risk that Israel is taking. But it looks like there is no there is no other chance than increasing the pressure in Gaza.
Colonel Ben Shalom, Jordanian King Abdullah II, during a meeting with outgoing German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, highlighted to the German leader that this is an Israeli war in Gaza. The only way out of it is for Israel to stop this war in Gaza, emphasizing this time and again in a narrative that obviously is twisted from reality. But nonetheless, he did highlight that from his perspective, right now, the only way to bring a sustainable peace to this volatile region is apparently merely a two-state solution. Nothing else is needed.
Well, as usual, we have to relate to the words coming from our dear friend, the Jordanian king, as something that's given for internal consumption, for political reasons, and we have to detach that from the multi-layer aspect that Jordan is on board with us as well. For we see the Middle East very similar to the Jordanians, but we understand the complexity, the sensitivity with the Jordanians here, so I wouldn't attach much importance to what the Jordanian king says on its own. Certainly that's not the entire picture. Talking about a two-state solution, of course, that's the right thing for him to say. For us, the right thing to say, not politically, by the way. You could believe whatever you want as far as the outcome of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Certainly right now, during a war where we have not yet eliminated Hamas, It's wrong to speak about a two-state solution as an output from this war, for that would be granting immediate, granting Hamas like a prize. Oh, Hamas, you attacked us. Okay, let's go give you a state. That's, of course, irrelevant. I would even argue that for the Palestinians themselves, for the Palestinian Authority, that would be terrible. Because the Palestinian Authority, of course, are bitter rivals of Hamas. They see them as the enemy. We should do everything we can to strengthen and support the Palestinian Authority and the moderate arms inside the Palestinians. Of course, what I said now, even what I said now, is problematic inside of Israeli politics. So let's take all those external aspects with a grain of salt and see what we need to do in order to promote the goals of the war, which are to eliminate Hamas governmentally and militarily and return the hostages.
I think it's important to note that the Palestinian Authority is deeply corrupt. It's a problematic organization. It needs to be reformed, and European funds put into this authority are being misused for multiple purposes, something that the European Union needs to look at its own manner of distribution of those type of funds. But nonetheless, we need to also keep in touch with reality, and therefore, what Colonel Ben Shalom said on the latter part of his response was that the Palestinian Authority and Israel do maintain security cooperation and coordination, more specifically, in counterterrorism, particularly in the northern Samaria region, which is vital for the national security interests of the State of Israel, and therefore it is important. But nonetheless, the one is not necessarily supportive of the other, and we need to focus on reality as it is and be pragmatic within that context. Now, General Sofrian, I'd like to turn to you with regard to the ongoing negotiations. It seems like there is no actual breakthrough. Talks are stopping again, starting again, stopping again. It seems like a fluctuating event with no true light at the end of the tunnel.
Each side has its own interest, and the gaps are too deep to be bridged only by discussing, and applying multiple force on the people in Gaza. That means that the Hamas has its own interest, and the interest is to stop the war and to be able to stay in power in Gaza. They don't say that we should control Gaza, but we won't be eliminated. We won't go away. Whoever you decide that is going to control Gaza, it's okay with us. We will be there. And actually, we will be the real rulers of Gaza. That's what they mean. And of course, they want the international guarantee that Israel will not renew the war whenever it chooses to do so. On the other hand, Israel says, no way. We won't be able to stop the war. We don't want to stop the war. We want to eliminate Hamas. We want to change the governance in Gaza to apply somebody else to be in power in Gaza, to control Gaza. They don't say who, but they say who is not. That means the Palestinian Authority. And you mentioned that this is corrupted. This is not the main reason. The main reason is internal objection inside Israel to being able to see the Palestinian Authority controlling Gaza. And of course, with this government as it is formed right now, it won't pass. Therefore, we don't have any proposal of who's going to control Gaza. Nobody's volunteering to be in power there. And therefore, we are stuck in such a way, in no-way street. That means that the Palestinian Authority, the Hamas, Palestinian Authority, Hamas, of course. Hamas wants to keep the hostages as much as they can and to release them step by step, easy, to drag time, because meanwhile they have ceasefire and they have the ability to reorganize the capabilities. On the other hand, Israel is not willing to apply to or to meet their needs or their terms, and therefore this is an ongoing session of, a deaf speaking to somebody who can't speak. And that's the situation right now.
Yes, but General Sofrian, if I may challenge you on that one, since let's put the Palestinian Authority the way it is. It is dominated by the Fatah organization in the areas of Judea, Samaria, the Jordan Valley. Hamas, of course, won the election, not by much, but nonetheless, it won the election over the corruption of Fatah back in 2006. And this brought about a certain reality. Now, the majority of the so-called Palestinian population voted only 2.41% for the so-called or the former prime minister of the Palestinian Authority, a technocrat, Salam Fayyad, who is the only one who put on his banner a two-state solution, meaning that except for 2.41%, the rest don't even consider a two-state solution as a viable option. Now, beyond that, let's go into the clans operating within Fatah. Let's say that they do take over the Gaza Strip. The only ones that could take over the Gaza Strip are the leaders of the Gazan clans within Fatah, who have been rejected by the president of the Palestinian Authority, namely Mahmoud Abbas, including Mohammed Dahlan and other actors who are very significant when we're talking about the capacity of the Palestinian Authority to re-engage in any way. Now, let alone that issue, we are also in a situation where the Palestinian Authority itself has a hard time controlling the little territory still under its sway. So what guarantee do we have that they'll be able to take over the Gaza Strip and then preserve what little they can within that very complex territory?
We don't have any guarantee, but the idea is that they will not be alone there. They'll be supported by the Egyptian, by the Emirates, by Saudi Arabia, by other Arab countries that are willing to take part in that, but not to be in prime. That means to allow somebody else to control, and he will be supported by them. But what other option do we have? Do we want Hamas to maintain in power in Gaza for the coming years? The answer is no. What other solution do we have? What kind of proposal do the Israeli government lay on the table for somebody to control Gaza Strip that will be acceptable on Israel, on the Palestinians, on the Arab world? We don't have any proposal, any solution. We just have to say, or just know to say, no, 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 no. But what can you propose? What kind of solution do you have?
I propose many of our panelists run into the political system and then propose their own proposals. But until that day happens, God knows. But General Gavish, let's shift gears to another very complex issue, and that is Syria. Yesterday, there were circulating videos of Turkish convoys with tanks and other types of heavy gear military vehicles driving southward with pro-HTS, namely Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or the Damascus regime, so-called self-proclaimed journalists coming out and saying, yes, these are the Turkish military going to take over the bases near Damascus and the T4 airbase in Palmyra. Subsequently, that same evening, last night, the Israeli Air Force struck heftily, if I may add, both in the vicinity of Damascus as well as in Hama, an airbase there, as well as the Palmyra airbase, pretty much destroying them entirely. This was a very strong attack. Subsequently, we heard both the defense minister and foreign minister coming out and saying, Syria, keep in mind, we're not allowing any hostile force to enter into this territory that may threaten the state of Israel. This message, of course, was towards Turkey. Are we on a course of collision between Turkey and Israel?
Jonathan, just one word to the previous discussion. The one that came with the idea in a solution was President Trump. So maybe Amnon, maybe this is the solution that we'd have to look for the future. But going back to your question, Jonathan, indeed, Syria it's quite a huge challenge from the Israeli point of view. There are advantages and disadvantages. Of course, one of the challenges that we've discussed more than once would be how much Turkey would see itself involved in Syria, and we see it is going this way. Of course, from the Turkish point of view, they want to be part of what is happening there. They want to establish themselves within the region as a projecting power. Of course, they have their own challenges from their point of view, with the Kurds and with the Iranians and so on. Of course, also they could look toward Israel, and this would be really something that I think no one wants, that a NATO country would be next to the border of Israel, projecting in any way its power toward Israel, limiting the Israeli freedom of flight over Syria. This could be something which is very challenging from a military perspective and defense perspective of Israel. We have to remember that from the Israeli point of view, we want Syria free of any other involvement, either Turkish one or Russian one or whatever. And of course, Israel, from its own interest, wants to make sure that its borders are secure, that it would keep to himself the freedom of flight over those areas, and this is when we could see the clash, and hopefully we won't get there, but it is looking quite challenging. You're right, Israel strike quite strongly. The Israeli Air Force is always doing a very accurate job. And this is also, and we've talked about it more than once, that the change in Israel strategy, that it is not only decisiveness, alert, active defense, passive defense, deterrence, it is also prevention, which means preventing all potential threat toward Israel. And of course, it could be a potential threat.
Preemption is the word I think we should use in this
Preemption.
context.
Yeah, you're right.
Right. Colonel Ben Shalom, I'd like to hear your take on this. And naturally, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz earlier today relayed a unambiguous threat to the so-called Al-Julani, Hamad al-Shara. If you allow forces hostile to Israel into your country to entrench wherever they may be, it will come at your cost.
Well, as far as the declarations by our Minister of Defense, in general, I personally don't like the themes or the music coming out here. And I need to explain this, I know, because this is a time to be very proactive and even to be aggressive. But the thing is, we have to do that while at the same time using diplomacy and using rhetoric that doesn't incite other things. But also remember that just like I spoke about the Jordanian king, Israeli leadership also has its internal communities and base to appease sometimes, and sometimes external rhetoric is made to look powerful for internal audiences. And I apologize for being so critical about this, but to the point, I think what we can do is connect the dots and understand where Israel's strategy is going. And I say connect the dots because it's not always very clearly expressed. But look, in all arenas now, it goes to Lebanon and Syria and Gaza, we have this forward deployment, forward defense. After October 7th, by the way, it's even changing our DNA as far as, in the past we would see an enemy has means, capability, and intentions. And as long as we decipher the intentions, we think an attack isn't imminent, we could wait, we could contain. And after all, what do we want? We want quiet. We want long periods of quiet. All that changed. We don't want that we don't want quiet. We want stability. We want peace. We want this long term. And after October 7th, we can't take any chances. So to the Syrian arena, the optimism they tried to portray in the beginning in Israel, we see this more and more in a pessimistic way because we see what's happening. We're not fooled by rhetoric and suits. We see negative elements, negative capabilities. And what we say is, they will not be on our border. We're not going to ever again enable a capability to be on a border that can be launched immediately. Because then if we're wrong with understanding intentions, it happens in minutes and we have them on October 7th. So it's very clear to me why the Israeli government is saying, no, the southwestern part of Syria is demilitarized. We don't want any forces there. Strategic munitions and capabilities we will take out because we don't want them to fall into the right hands. At the same time, hopefully Syria goes in the directions they declare, but we must be pessimistic and act accordingly.
You know, there is some think tank in Washington and some expert who has been following the Damascus regime for many years. Now he posts a lot on X. And he came out and stated, oh, what a wonderful appointment by al-Julani, who instead of appointing a grand mufti, the most senior religious leader in the country from his Salafist Wahhabists, he appointed one who is more of an Islamist. Now, naturally, this Islamist was previously appointed by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan as the head of the Islamist Council for Syria in Turkey before, of course, the fall of the Assad regime. And during some of his ceremonies, which I used to follow in the past, he stated quite openly that their intentions with regard to Jerusalem, their intentions with regard to Israel, are very belligerent in essence, and that is something that we need to keep in mind. They might say one thing to the Europeans who are eager to see the Syrians returning to Syria, but at the same time, we need to deal with them across the border. And therefore, I completely agree. There might be rhetoric, but this rhetoric, to my mind, sometimes is justified, but you need to be very careful with the wording you use in every such speech. Now, General Sofrin, we have roughly 4 minutes left, and I'd like to hear your take on Syria. We will have to leave Iran for tomorrow and Yemen for tomorrow, but nonetheless, you've been dealing with Syria your whole adult life, which is an understatement. And therefore, I'm very curious to hear your perspective. To what degree can we be pragmatic to such a leader who is very eager to be accepted by the West, and he has very clear short-term goals when we're talking about lifting of sanctions, which they're very eager for, to say the least, for obvious reasons. But his long-term objectives have not altered.
Some of my friends told me that, in his opinion, Mr. al-Julani, now Muhammad al-Shara, has made a strategic change. It's not only by his own appearance, but his strategic thinking. That means he wants to keep Syria as a sovereign country, as one country united under his control. He doesn't want the Iranians inside Syria. They, despite the Iranian, they have a lot of claims on the Iranian, and they want to sue them in the international court for $300 billion for the suffer they caused to the Syrian people. They don't want the Russians, but nevertheless, now the Russians are negotiating with them to stay in these two garrisons they have in Tartus and the naval port, and of course in Hamaimim, what we call the airport, and for a long time. And probably it is going to be implied. And of course, we have Turkey. Now, the instability inside Syria is very, very high. And even though it's trying to unify the country under its control, it doesn't really work out very well so far. Many people object he's controlling the country. And Israel has defined very clearly that south of Damascus, no armed forces will be applied or be deployed to endanger Israel from what we call the Syrian front, or what used to be the Syrian armed forces that were deployed there from 1973 up to this the end of 2024. Now we have to see what of course Turkey has a lot of ambition to get inside Syria and to apply or to deploy its own assets inside Syria and to get control on the country. which will endanger Israel because suddenly we're going to have a mutual front line with the Turkish armed forces, and we don't want that to happen. And therefore, the message that was sent yesterday by attacking all this garrison that the Turkish army was due to be deployed, and the message to Al Jurani that we won't allow anyone to get in is clear enough, and I believe that each side will understand its own implications. But we have to keep an open mind to be consistent with our policy. That means to attack any attempt to deploy Turkish forces in the area of Damascus or south of Damascus or even north of Damascus inside Syria that will endanger Israel, and its effect on the influence on the current regime is going to be very high.
Consistency is key. And I think it's vital, as you said, to be consistent in those stances. There were circulating reports about a potential meeting between this Al-Julani and President Trump in May, when the American leader is set to come to Saudi Arabia. From what I hear, it's not true, but we'll have to wait and see whether or not there is some situation in which Trump would agree to sit with this former Al-Qaeda operative who has plenty of blood on his hands of American service members. But nonetheless, I'd like to immediately thank General Sofrin, Colonel Ben Shalom, and General Gavish for all of your valuable insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel, and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at TV7israelnews.com.